Angelique Ashby is a bulldog, and I say that in the most loving and respectful way for her district, Natomas, and fights for her constituents, and I've always appreciated that about her. I see two people I respect debating heavily in the mayor and Angie, and I wanted to read about it, and I wanted to be educated, and I wanted to help educate you guys as well. Joining us right now, nice enough too, Angelique Ashby, Councilwoman of the Sacramento City Council. Angie, it's Dave. How are you this morning?
Hey there, Dave. Good morning.
Good morning. I just full disclosure had the mayor on. I'm sure you saw on Twitter earlier in the last segment. There's a big deal going on with Measure U, and I'm hearing things about aquatic centers and Chicago politics and retribution and op-eds and huge asks from you and potentials of dying projects. And I got the mayor's point of view, and I wanted to, of course, bring you on. I don't know if you heard any of what he said, but what is your big fear here, and what really is the beef going on?
It's all so dramatic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I heard some of what he said, not quite all. First of all, thanks for having us on. I know, you focus on sports, and to me, this is sports, because what I am proposing here would be Sacramento's only Olympic-sized pool. I started this effort about 6 years ago, and I used Natomas funding to do a feasibility study, bring on some partners like Mike Testa over there at Visit Sacramento and the Metro Chamber and the Sacramento Sports Commission. I said, hey, Natomas doesn't have a pool in the north area. District 1 is the only area of the city that doesn't have a public pool. If we were going to do this and it was going to serve the whole city, what would we want? And that feasibility study came back as a really world-class facility with an Olympic-sized pool. So I set out for how to fund that. I have squirreled away $20 million in Natomas funds. I have worked with the school district. In fact, I carried their school bond measure this year to make sure they'd have enough money to participate too. I've already spent about $3 million. I relocated a dog park, fixed a street, paid for architects and design drawings and planning checks and all that stuff, and we are ready to go. This pool has gone to the city council 6 times in 5 years and been approved as recently as February. The last piece needed is for the city to put forward $14 million. Bids are due on Friday. We could break ground next month, or we could not provide the $14 million even though we have it and watch the project die.
The mayor, I think, said something about that, and I hope I'm not getting his words wrong. He mentioned that it was a much bigger ask from you than anyone else, and he mentioned that something about, and my fault for not understanding this completely, that the school district or something there had pledged, you said they'd pledged X, but they only had Y. Could you clear that up at all?
Sure. Mm-hmm. The school district has set aside $5 million for sure. They've already allocated that money. Okay. They still have to take an official vote.
Sure.
I have asked them to add $6 million to that number, which they are willing to consider. Okay. However, they won't consider any of it, the money they set aside or the additional $6 million, if the council doesn't take the $14 million step. So again, really this is 3 tranches of money. $20 million from Natomas, that's Natomas development fees, money I've gotten people to contribute to this, and then $10 million from the school district in total, which they still do have to vote on, and then a $14 million ask from the city of Sacramento's general fund. Let's put that in perspective. Yes, my ask is the biggest of the year in this particular budget, but I am also the only council district without a public pool. There are 12 public pools in the city of Sacramento and 16 community centers. There are 8 council districts, in case you're keeping track. I have none of them. None. And in every instance in the past, the city of Sacramento has paid 100% of the cost of those community centers and pools. I am putting up 70% of the cost and asking the city for 30%. I would say it is just simply my turn.
Well, and that's what bothers me. And I'm going to give you a chance to absolutely bulldoze this whole subject. I don't know if maybe there's a counter, and I don't want you arguing against yourself and what you're trying to do. But here's what bothers me, Angie, is my world is the Kings. And a big part of Natomas, many would argue the biggest part of Natomas, was removed and put downtown. And I remember you bulldogging for that to happen, despite the fact that that was, in a sense, going to harm some of your constituency, but be better for the city. And that's the type of stuff I appreciate. I'm very interested in what the city has done to help Natomas since 2000. Really, I guess 16, I think, was the last game at Arco. And I'm not sure if maybe you just don't have any kids in your constituency at all. Maybe Natomas has no kids whatsoever, but this seems like kind of a, pun intended, slam dunk here. If every district has a pool but yours, every pool and community center has been funded 100% by the city. This project was voted forward as recently as February. I also understand there's a Friday deadline on some things. What is the Angie, argue against yourself. I mean, what is the counter here, or is there a legitimate counter?
So, obviously, Natomas is actually home of most of the families. Inderkum High School, which is the campus that will share this aquatic facility with the city, is actually the largest, most populated high school in the city of Sacramento. 2,000 students at Inderkum High School who currently right now don't have an aquatic facility. You're right. Natomas was built around Arco Arena. It was there first, of course, now Sleep Train, but every restaurant, every school, every housing division was built around that project. And we are constantly in flux trying to determine how to move forward without it, how to replace it. Of course, you've heard a conversation around the zoo. But, you know, the people of Natomas need support from the city. I don't know if you know this or not, but the reason that everybody had such ease getting in and out of Arco Arena is because Natomas paid for those roads. Natomas paid for those on-ramps and off-ramps. Natomas paid for everything in its district, including its fire stations. It's the only part of the city that pays its own way, and it always has. And in fact, there is a deal outlined in 1989 that says that the city of Sacramento is on the hook to build out every amenity in the regional park. So far, they have spent $0 on that, because I have found the money for all of it. So it's time. It's time for Sacramento to step up and recognize that Natomas is 1/5 of the city. 110,000 people live in Natomas. My district is 1/8 of this city and has 0% of its public pools and 0% of its community centers. I am bringing $20 million to the table. That has never been done before. I ask only that the city provide 30% of what they owe 100% to. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Bids are due on Friday. We either break ground next month or this project goes away forever.
Why were you and Jeff Harris left out of this?
Jeff Harris and I have two things in common this month. One, we're left out of the mayor's priorities, and two, we both wrote op-eds saying that bonding was a bad idea and led to Stockton's bankruptcy, and we should not follow suit. I'll have to leave it to everybody else to figure out why those two things are connected, but I will tell you this. The city manager put together a list of the council's priorities. I know the mayor said it doesn't exist. I'm staring at it right now. It's in my hand. And the aquatic facility is the number one item. In fact, when we get off this phone, I will tweet out a picture of it, Carmichael Dave, so that everyone knows that it does exist. The mayor took that list. He chose from it his priority projects. He says those projects are for underserved communities and kids. I say a pool is for kids. I say Land Park is not an underprivileged community, and neither is Pocket Greenhaven, both of which receive funding in his proposal. So something's got to give. There's a reason why he left us out. I believe it's petty partisan politics. I don't think the mayor likes that I took a position opposing his bonding system. I don't think he likes that Jeff Harris took a position opposing his bonding system, and I think he's punishing the people of Natomas because all of their projects are left out of the priority list.
You know, one question, Angelique Ashby, councilperson for the city of Sacramento, joining us. One question I didn't get to ask the mayor, and again, I may just be completely ignorant on this, but does mayor generally doesn't put budgets out? Isn't that the city manager? And that's something
Correct.
I don't. What's different? Or I don't know if you can even answer this, but what's different now? Why is the mayor putting out budgets and not the city manager? What am I missing there?
Big difference between Darrell Steinberg and Kevin Johnson. Kevin Johnson used to put out a memo, and he would talk to every member of the council. That is exactly what Howard did, our city manager. He went to every member of the council and put out a memo with a list of their priorities, and then the council would vote on it. Here's the difference between KJ and Darrell. Darrell took that list and eliminated everything from it that he didn't want funded, and then put it on an agenda for action. It really isn't his role in our system of governance. It is the city manager's job. Now, if people of the city of Sacramento want the mayor to be the person who proposes the budget, they'll have to vote in a strong mayor system, but that's not the system we have in place now. The system we have in place now, this duty belongs to the city manager.
Angie, the mayor said, hey, listen, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that he represents Natomas, that he wants this project done, that this is a big ask, and that the project could eventually get done, that there can be money there, that there will be money there. This is just too much right now. Why is that worrisome for you?
Well, it's not worrisome for me. He does represent Natomas. He should represent Natomas. And yet he did not select one Natomas priority. He took away a business district improvement project from Northgate, took away improvements to the South Natomas Community Center, improvements to the South Natomas Garden and Art Center, and those projects were no different in their funding allocation request than the ones that were selected. And he took away, of course, the aquatic facility and now leans on the excuse that it was the most expensive item, even though we have $34 million still available. So, I went to law school, so, there's not a lot of math in law school, but I will say this, $14 million from $34 million still leaves $20 million to play with. I don't understand why we can't just fund the pool now and move it forward. I do understand that some of my colleagues think that time is not of the essence. They're simply wrong. The bids are due on Friday. The prices are only guaranteed for 90 days on those bids. The cost escalation beyond those 90 days crumbles this program. This is our last chance. I've worked on it for over 5 years, and this is it. We've cobbled together the money. Here's our big opportunity. Sacramento can either have an Olympic-sized pool that draws Olympic-sized events, or we cannot. That's the vote today at 2 o'clock at City Hall.
And again, dumb guy question here, and I'm probably going with apples and oranges, but just philosophically, you're talking about the delay. I remember, and again, everything in my world ties back to the arena, but I remember the lawsuit that happened from Isaac Gonzalez and friends that held up the arena bonding. And if I remember correctly, the worry there is the delay, rates would go up, property values would go up, et cetera, et cetera. I believe it ended up costing the city in the millions of dollars because of that delay. $20 million. So even though we're talking about two totally different things and two totally different reasons, am I hearing correctly that part of the reason you don't want to put this off is it costs X right now, and the big worry, if not probability, is that if you put it off long enough, it's going to cost Y, and Y being a lot more money?
Every good project planner would tell you that at a minimum, 6 months equals 3%. Every good project planner would tell you that. You're right. In the case of Kevin McCarty's lawsuit, which was ultimately dismissed but precluded us from moving forward with bonds in a timely manner, it cost us $20 million for a less than 1 year delay on that arena. So imagine what this would cost. We're in a different era. Costs are escalating faster. We're dealing with international tariffs and other things that are causing escalations to happen more rapidly. I can tell you that we can barely put this together now because of the escalations. We've had to wait. We had to wait for Measure U. You might ask yourself, hey, if Angelique's been working on this for 5 or 6 years, why didn't she ask for the funding sooner? Because we didn't have the funds. We didn't have the funds, so we couldn't move it forward. I waited until it didn't take away from anybody else. I loved El Paso Heights and Oak Park. For goodness sakes, I went to Sac High and McGeorge. I've lived in Pocket Greenhaven. I want all of those communities to thrive, and I don't want to take a single thing away from any one of them. So I waited. And right now, this city can write a $14 million check to Natomas without taking a single drop of funding away from anybody else. And I waited for that moment. What the mayor suggests is that I am subject now to some new process that actually I shouldn't be subject to because this pool was approved back in February, long before the Measure U process was approved. And that in that process, I would compete against other communities that have less. I don't think that's fair. I think 12 pools across the city and 16 community centers across the city with none of them in District 1, and us coming to the table with 70% of the funding to do it ourselves should be enough for my colleagues to say, it's time for us to invest in a new growth area, give them the 30% gap funding they need, and proceed.
Councilperson Angelique Ashby joining us. Angie, if I could, just with the couple minutes we have left, I know this doesn't have much to do with this afternoon's meeting, but just for our listeners, because I know to many of them this is a a subject they're very much interested in. They're interested in both, but with the old Arco Arena, we haven't had, the pictures I see are of an old faded golden six, the six-man statue with weeds around it. And I know that, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon enough here about the zoo relocation, which will hopefully end up in Natomas. I just want to ask you generally, you've been guarding that area and taking care of your constituents since before the arena fight even happened. How satisfied or unsatisfied are you with the promises that were made? And I was there for many of them and love many of the people that made those promises. Has Natomas been even kind of taken care of since the arena left?
Not yet.
That's important.
They have not. Not yet. They have not.
Loyalty's
but
important.
I will. Yeah, I think so too. And I think the arena reuse is critical, not just for Natomas, but for our whole city. I think there's a real opportunity with the zoo. By the way, let's remind folks, it's not just a zoo. The zoo is partnered with UC Davis. So there's a whole commitment there around jobs and education and conservation of species. That's a potential opportunity for Sacramento to really be on the map in a cool and important way, and it could live out here in Natomas. But there are a lot of steps that need to be taken. I am proud of the council for voting to approve the funding for a feasibility study, take a look at what that would mean on the arena site, how it could serve our region, and how it could be built out. If not a zoo, then we need something else, a hospital, a job center, a community amenity, something that is placemaking and that gives the people of Natomas some sense of satisfaction that the promises have been kept. As you know, Carmichael, Dave, when I came on the scene, the biggest threat to the arena moving downtown wasn't external, it was internal. Yeah. There were people fighting all over the place about where that arena should be. And when I came on the scene, I tried very hard to get Natomas to understand that if we fought too hard, we created a crack in our armor that would allow places like Seattle or Anaheim to come in and make an attempt to take our team. So we tried very hard to seal up that crack, but it's going to be important in the future that people remember that a promise was made to Natomas. And bigger than that, people just need to remember that Natomas is part of the city of Sacramento, that we deserve aquatic facilities, that our kids deserve community centers, that a zoo is important, that keeping a promise is important, that 100,000 people in the city of Sacramento, mind you, there are only 500,000 people in Sacramento, 1/5 of them live in Natomas. And I need people to remember to keep their promises to that part of the city and to understand that we're doing the best we can out here to provide funding to offset costs in ways that no one else has been asked to do so. But then when the time comes like today at 2 o'clock and there's an important item on our agenda that we've fought for 5 years and put up 70% of the funding for, that there can be no more excuses, no more delays, no more questions. Just move the item forward and show the people of Natomas. The mayor says he's their mayor, then be their mayor and give them the same types of facilities that other people in the rest of your city already enjoy.
Well, and that's a good way to close it out, because now you arrive on why this is a passion project for me, and I think you hit on it for a lot of our audience too. Whether you agree with Angelique Ashby, whether you agree with the mayor, you fall somewhere in the middle. There's one thing to me that is undeniable, and that is that you, Angie, were put in an impossible position when you basically were fighting, and pardon the turn of phrase here, but you were fighting to almost hurt your own part of the city for the greater good of the city. Imagine, everybody, you represent a part of Sacramento, and you were instrumental behind and in front of the scenes in getting that downtown arena, knowing that it was taking away 18,000 people 41 times a night, plus all the houses, plus all the traffic for concerts and everything else. You were basically saying, okay, this is going to hurt us more than any other place in Sacramento, but what would hurt even more is losing the team. And I was there for the promises made, and I was there, heck, at the MLS approval when you voted in favor, once again, of the city growing. And I remember very clearly you saying, I do hope that promises are kept and that we can work on getting a soccer training facility in Natomas as well. You're still fighting for your area, but I don't think Natomas has gotten anywhere near what they deserve. And every Kings fan and really every person who's a fan of growth in the city owes you and owes, more importantly, your constituents a debt of gratitude. So this is important, and I think this is something people should be passionate about. Angie, I want to ask you, lastly, the meeting's at 2 p.m. today. If people want to express themselves, what are the ways they can do so to help what you're trying to do?
Yeah, they can reach out to the mayor and council members. They can call them in their council offices or send them emails. All of their contact information is on the city's website. Or they can show up at City Hall at 2 o'clock today, fill out a speaker slip for item number 1, which is the mayor's budget proposal at the Budget and Audit Committee. They can get up and speak and say, hey, I think that Natomas deserves this aquatic facility. I think it's a good deal. And no matter where you live in Sacramento, in the region, this could benefit you. We have no Olympic-sized pool in Sacramento. So if your kid likes to swim, if you are an adult who's in a master swim program, if you like water polo or synchronized swimming, this would be the premier facility in the region for that. I posted some pictures on Twitter and Facebook. People can go check them out, but I need help. People are going to have to speak up and apply pressure to their own council members and to the mayor and let them know that Sacramento, I voted for every homeless project that the mayor has brought forward. We spent $16 million on a homeless shelter last month for downtown. We gave him that money at mid-year. I've voted for everybody's projects, $40 million for the riverfront in Old Sac. I support the $1 million that Jay Chenier has asked for youth, but I expect those guys to consider Natomas too, and right now, they're not. And in addition to helping the homeless and bringing on new housing and serving communities that are left behind, we also have to keep promises to communities like Natomas. And right now, we are fortunate. We have the funding to do both. So people can show up at 2 o'clock and ask that the mayor and council support this aquatic facility and community center, that Sacramento deserves world-class facilities.
Well, Sacramento is nothing if not loyal, and Natomas had our back. So I hear you, and I certainly hope that Angie, I hope in the end this all ends up being dumb politics, and you get your aquatic center, and there's compromise, and I do love and respect both you and the mayor, and appreciate and will forever appreciate everything you guys did for the city and for the team. And in this case, I think what you're doing and what you're saying is absolutely on par with how you act with your constituents constantly, which is defending them and advocating for them. And I appreciate your time. I know this is a big day for you. Thanks for spending some minutes with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, you take care. That is Councilwoman Angelique Ashby, and there you go.
You're listening to The Drive.